This is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Alita.
And I'm Faithless Forrest. And we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
On today's show, we will be interviewing Jenn Taylor, a local freethought leader.
Alrighty. But first, we want to tell you a little bit about the sponsors of our show. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30 before this show ends. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday we hold the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday we mix it up. Sometimes with the get-together we call Reflections. It features a potluck lunch in someone's home with discussion about a theme. And sometimes we meet to play games or other activities.
And in fact, later this week we will meet to celebrate the autumnal equinox.
Yes.
And we'll also, some of us at least, will be giving blood on that because hands that pray don't accomplish anything, but the blood of humans does. Well, later in the show, we'll give you our websites to visit for additional details, including times and locations. All right, so we've got some in-the-news stuff here. Alita?
Yes, we do. Now, in ongoing news from Kentucky, Rowan County Court Clerk Kim Davis is in the news
Yet again.
When Davis returned to work last Monday, September 14th, she insisted that marriage licenses issued to same-sex couples not bear her name. According to the attorney for the deputy court clerk, Brian Mason of Rowan County, Davis may have overstepped the law by replacing the marriage licenses with ones that not only don't have her name, but not even the name of the county or any reference to a clerk or deputy clerk. Mason is concerned that he has been issuing illegal marriage licenses with only his initials instead of a signature. His initials are then notarized. The same-sex couple that originally sued Davis for not issuing a marriage license said in a separate course filing that Davis is, quote, requiring her clerk to issue licenses in his capacity as a notary public rather than a deputy clerk, end quote. According to Mason's attorney, quote, it also appears to this counsel those changes were made in some attempt to circumvent the court's orders and may have raised to the level of interference against court's orders, end quote. Kim, when will you stop trying to force your archaic views on others who will do you no harm?
Well, my goodness. But that's not the only place in the world where there's trouble. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, there is an egregious mix of church and state surrounding parenting classes that a judge ordered as part of a custody case. When she attended the first class, Holly, I guess?
Holly, yes.
Salzman, I'll mangle it,
Holly Salzman.
was astounded by what transpired. I walked into the session, and the very first thing she said to me was, I start my sessions by praying. Salzman told KRQE. When I expressed my concerns that I didn't pray, she said, well, this is what I do, and she proceeded to say a prayer out loud. Holly reported the offense to the family court, but got no response. The praying continued at the next meeting. Salzman was so disgusted and offended that she decided to stop going to the sessions. As a result, her children were taken away, prompting her to finish the 10 mandatory sessions in order for her to get them back. As a further odd twist, the instructor, Mary Pepper, asked Salzman to pay her, quote, under the table, unquote. It turns out Pepper was using a public library to reduce costs, again, against the library policies. The American Civil Liberties Union is looking into the classes which clearly violate church-state separation. No one should be put in a position where they are forced to accept training or therapy that violates their own religious beliefs and morals, the ACLU Executive Director Peter Simon said. It is amazing that people think that they must force their religion onto others.
It goes on, doesn't it?
Yes. It's as if the Christians can't accept that, you know, they have a place where they actually have a privileged position, the tax-free churches,
yes,
where they can practice their beliefs. They've got to bend the public institution of government to further their aims.
Exactly.
You know, as Benjamin Franklin said, you know, I think a religion that must appeal to the civil powers to sustain it may not be one that its God is looking out for.
No.
I'm paraphrasing Franklin.
And a good job. Well, tonight we have with us by phone Jenn Taylor. Jennifer Taylor was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and raised within a dual religious family, Jehovah's Witness and Baptist. She was skeptical from a young age with an inquisitive nature. She considers herself both an atheist as well as a secular humanist, with a strong interest in community service, social justice, and separation of church and state issues. She currently serves as the organizer for Black Atheists of Philadelphia, a group that both welcomes and encourages non-theists of diverse backgrounds to become both open and active within the greater Philadelphia area. Black Atheists of Philadelphia is affiliated with African Americans for Humanism and the Greater Philadelphia Coalition of Reason. In addition, she is an organizer for the newly formed group Humanists of East Tennessee. She is also a board member of the Freethought Society and an active member of the New Jersey Humanist Network. Furthermore, she's an avid jazz enthusiast who also organizes the Philadelphia Jazz Meetup. Jenn is presently employed within corporate America, has a background in management, and has more than 17 years of diverse management level experience. I'll let you take over there.
Jenn regularly visits several groups within the PA-NJTN area. I guess that's Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Tennessee, and has also attended numerous secular events, conferences, and rallies, including the Reason Rally. I was there. You were there too, Alita.
I was. Mm-hmm.
The Blackout Secular Rally, and has also participated in the Madison Atheist booth during the group's Ask an Atheist event. In addition, she's been a guest on the Black Freethinkers radio show and the Forbidden Fruit radio show.
I like that.
And has served as a guest panelist during the People of Color Beyond Faith Conference. Her short-term goals are to promote diversity within the secular community and being an encouraging force and support to members of the secular community that have not publicly proclaimed their skepticism about religion. Long-term, her mission is to help move the world towards accepting the valid information related to discussions that affect us all and to help provide networking opportunities, information, and support to those who have yet to discover their voice within the secular community.
Well,
Jenn, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Are you on the phone?
Yes. Hi. How are you?
All righty, great.
We're doing well. Now,
Great.
Jenn, it sounds like you've had a very interesting childhood. When did you... So when did you realize that you were an atheist, and what led you to that conclusion?
Well, I actually met atheists, other folks in the Freethought community, right about a couple months before the Reason Rally for the first time.
Oh.
So I literally went to a humanist meetup and an atheist meetup, and they were like, "Are you going to the Reason Rally?" I was like, "What's the Reason Rally?" And they were telling me all about it, and I was like, "Oh, great! Yeah, I'm going." so I ended up going, but prior to that, I claimed to be agnostic, and before that, I claimed to be spiritual for many years, and saying that I was spiritual was just a way of not even addressing the religion question. You know, I was basically unchurched, and I just and hadn't yet figured out that I was an atheist. I became skeptical from when I was 6 years old. I was at my mom had a Jehovah's Witness over for Bible study, and we had this book called My Book of Bible Stories, which was a very graphic book, you know, depicting scenes in the Bible that are disturbing, you know, especially for a young child in vivid color. So that day we happened to be going over the flood story, and I remember looking at this picture and seeing people crying and drowning and animals and I remember asking, you know, the sister that was giving the Bible study, well, what happened to the dinosaurs? And she said, well, the dinosaurs were created in order to flatten the earth enough for humans to walk upon it. And once, I was sort of like bubble wrap, you know, stepping on bubble wrap. Similar to that. It was pretty crazy. And I said, she said, well, when that was accomplished, God no longer needed the dinosaurs. So, you know, just skeptical and partially disturbed by what she was saying. I said, well, what's going to happen when God is done with us? and from then on, I thought, okay, I believe in a God, but you know, I questioned whether it was the biblical God, and through the years, I studied the Bible. I've read it cover to cover a couple of times. And other religious books. I've been to a number of different churches and different religious institutions, and I always look for this feeling, like people say that they're in church and they're like, God speaks to them and they're touched by the Holy Spirit and things of that nature. Right. And I just don't remember ever feeling anything. And I ended up going to the Baptist church too, because I had to go to both the Kingdom Hall Jehovah's Witness and the Southern Baptist Church with Dad. And you go to the Kingdom Hall, and it's all, you know, quiet and peaceful, and people are more monotone and things, and they're built like, well, the ones that I attended were built like bread boxes. They had no windows, nothing on the walls, and things like that. And when I asked about why aren't there windows here, why aren't there, I was told that when the end time comes, you know, during Armageddon, everyone's supposed to run to the Kingdom Hall that they're supposed to be attending, and be shielded within the Kingdom Hall from everything that's going on outside.
Oh my!
And I'm
Wow.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. So what happens on your way there? So growing up, I'm visualizing like, okay, Armageddon, things are going on, I'm thinking things are flying through the air, you're supposed to get to this Kingdom Hall. I mean, I'm picturing a scene out of The Wizard of Oz, you know, like houses flying and whatnot. The goddess of the sky, I'll get you, my pretty. I don't know. It was just a wild ideas. But then when I would go to Dad's church, and it was lively. Like, you would see people jumping, screaming, running up and down the aisles, shouting, standing on the pews, and things like that. And I remember watching people go into convulsions as if they were having a seizure. And how I was told, like, oh, wow, you know, they're catching a Holy Spirit. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, whatever whatever jumps on them, I don't want it on me. That's crazy. So although I thought about being connected to a God, I also thought, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of creepy.
Well, Jen, can I ask for some amplification on that? When you went, when you asked the Jehovah's Witnesses why the hall didn't have any windows, and their answer, made you uncomfortable, how old were you then at that point? Were you just still 6 years old, or was this a little later?
Well, it was a little later. I was, maybe about 10 by that time.
And so by then you would have heard the stories in Revelations that talk about an end of the world and so on, right?
Right. And at that point, I had read my book of Bible stories a couple of times, and I had already read a lot of the Jehovah's Witness Bible by then, because I thought, okay, if there's this entity that we're supposed to be following, and I need to know what the rules are. I need to read the book. I need to know what it's like. And wherever I went, they were kind of like cherry picking, like we only read certain scriptures. We only were directed to certain scriptures in all the religious places that I've been to. And I thought, well, okay, let me study this. Let me get this together. And I actually took the Jehovah's Witness Bible. I took the King James version of the Bible. I had a Catholic Bible. I had a concordance, and I was like comparing these different side by side, these different scriptures, and finding a number of contradictions. And then I was like, okay, I'm learning. Maybe if I pray, I'll be able to understand why it's all different. And I would go to these Sunday school classes and ask all kinds of questions, and I thought that was good, but it's not very good, to ask questions, because they end up telling you, first of all, they look at you like, why are you asking us this?
Right.
Again. And the second thing is, they tell you, pray on it and have faith. And I'm like, well, talking to myself isn't helping, and and believing that this information is going to, enter my body some kind of way without asking questions, but yet I have to go to school every day. That didn't make any sense either.
Right.
So as time went on, I found myself exploring different places. By the time my son was born, well, I have a son who's almost 22, and by the time he was born, I went to maybe a couple more places after that. Maybe a couple more places to see what it was like. But I never wanted my son to ever go to church. So outside of weddings or funerals or family type of gathering, I never took my son to church. I just felt like it. I just felt like it was just one of those. I felt like it would be more confusing than good. And if I expose him to science and reason, critical thinking skills, and education and art and music, he would turn out to be well-rounded without fear, without superstition, because an element of fear has to exist in order for you to cling to this religion.
Exactly.
And I just did not want to. I felt like if for me to expose him to it would be a form of child abuse. To raise him to be fearful of something that you cannot see, that doesn't interact with you. And I mean, I just didn't, and it's like I was wondering, like, well, how do we know this is even real? We hear it from man. We read it in books that were written by man. There's over 400 contradictions to this book. What is right, and who determines what's right? And at that point, I was like, I'm done with it. I'm done with religion altogether. I just decided, okay, well, I'm not religious. I think that at that point, as an adult, I started thinking, well, if the God does exist, it's an entity that must be hunted down and destroyed,
Right.
not something to be revered, not something to be worshipped. And I just kept a lot of that to myself, you know, and I kept a lot of that to myself, and I just like, you know, it's better for me not to even discuss religion. I would just be like, well, okay, I'm spiritual. And that would be enough to get people off my case about,
Right.
where do you fellowship, sister, and trying to have a study with me and trying to get me to go to visit their church. And I would say, well, I'm not really a church person. I'm unchurched. And they were like, oh, well, you know, you haven't been to my church. You need to check out mine. You'll find it there. And I was like, yeah, I'm done with that. I'm done with it, you know. But thanks, but no thanks, you know. And it kind of took off from there. And many years later, when I first met Atheist face to face,
Mm-hmm.
I had this conversation with them and with the people that were there, and they were like, and I felt like I was home. I felt like, wow, there's some people out here that understand where I'm coming from.
Exactly.
There's some people out here, right? I felt like, wow, you know, like I just can't believe it. I can't believe there's so many other people out here and that don't believe like I don't. And man, when I went to the Reason rally and saw, well, I mean, there's different. It's debatable how many people were there. I mean, in my opinion, it was at least 35,000 people there.
It was a lot.
And,
Yeah.
that's a lot of people. and people were just, it was pouring down rain, but I felt like I belonged there, and I felt like, and I enjoyed the talks, and I just interacted with people. I hung out with people that I knew through Facebook and just got hugs and plenty of interaction. And I, you know, in the tent there were different organizations set up and things. And I was like, wow, this is just amazing.
It is, yeah.
Is a movement.
Yeah, we were there as well, and you know, there were people that we'd never heard of. Before that day, I'd never heard of Tim Minchin, for instance. I hadn't heard of, oh goodness, her name won't come to me, Goldstein? She's like, she wrote that recent book about philosophy.
Blackstone.
Gladstone?
Blackstone.
Blackstone?
Yeah.
She gave, you know, a very compelling speech condemning, you know, the evils of religion that have damaged women's rights.
Oh, wait a minute. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Greta Christina was one. Greta Christina was one person, but and I had never heard of her.
I think I had heard of her, but it was an amazing day because there were so many people that I had never heard of, and there they were on stage. You know, what's also cool is that there's another one planned for, I believe, next June.
Mm-hmm. The first weekend in June.
And hopefully we won't be rained on, and hopefully it won't cook us.
I wanted to ask you, Jen, you talked about not exposing your son to religion, and you know, I take it that some of those early experiences were somewhat traumatizing for you, like the pictures of the people dying during the flood. But how has your son taken to being not churched at all?
Well, my son ended up becoming a believer.
Uh-huh.
My son ended up going to church, and because I know my mother and you know other people that he was exposed to felt like I needed a spiritual home that I needed to go to, and I think that he just got, over time, he was just exposed to other family members, people at school, and things like that, and he felt like he wanted to belong and be a part of a religion. Despite me not exposing him to it. But the thing that I did not do is that I didn't really, have a home where I condemned religion or hatred towards or spoke about like hatred towards religious people. I thought, oh, if I just raise them without even going to church, there'll be no point in going to church. But I mean, now that I look back, I probably should have exposed them to more of what the harm that it does, and maybe actually should have spoken about it more in our home. But I never did. But I didn't.
So Jenn,
and he ended up.
Finish your sentence. He ended up.
So he ended up through exposure to different people. He ended up being a believer.
So I was surprised when you said that at 6 years old you were challenging the Bible class about dinosaurs, and I'm not actually able to remember exactly when I learned about dinosaurs, but I know that it was in 4th grade when I would have been 9-ish years old that I became enthusiastic about dinosaurs, and because it would be that year that I was begging my mother to take me to the St. Paul Science Museum, where they have this really great Triceratops skeleton, and they had a video about how it was excavated, and that's such a fascinating, compelling story. But as you described at age 6, wondering about the dinosaurs, I realized I may not have been that sophisticated to have thought of that objection to the flood story if it had been presented to me. I grew up without, my parents didn't go to church. Technically, my mother went to Unitarian Universalist church now and then, but if I was taken, it was no more than like twice, and it was probably because babysitting needed to happen. So, do you remember how you learned about dinosaurs? How did you learn about dinosaurs?
Well, I watched the Flintstones.
I hate to break this to you, Jenn. That's fiction. So.
I knew that, okay, there's dinosaurs on this cartoon, and I knew that they were extinct. I went to we had a number of books in our home. We went to the library growing up. So even despite growing up in a very religious home, we were allowed to read other books. And we had a lot of books about dinosaurs. We had encyclopedias that I read. We had like Disney encyclopedias. I read each one cover to cover. My mom, if we were acting up, she'd be like, "Go read a book," and we would just sit there and just read a book.
All right.
So it was like okay, and I just got lost in a world of books and reading. I could never get enough.
All right.
And,
So
even from that age, and both of my parents actually taught. My mom taught daycare. And so I was reading from the age of 2, and my dad worked at the naval base, and he taught math. So I got exposed to pretty smart parents. Not when it came to religion, but most other things.
all right. So at the point where you finally decided to self-describe as an atheist, your family's gotten wind of this, I assume. And if so, how did they react?
Well, I started getting tagged in posts on Facebook. Like other atheists would tag me in posts. So I think that a lot of them found out indirectly. Because I have at least a couple of hundred relatives on my Facebook page. And they just saw, oh, okay, well, there's some transformation here. I mean, she's agnostic, okay. And then, they just noticed that some of the posts. And a few times I was questioned about the posts. And as far as my mother, it was only in the last couple years where she had an issue with it. Like maybe about a year ago, she had some serious concerns about my atheism, because she she kept telling me, "Oh yeah, you're spiritual," and she was in denial for a long time. And I said, like, she thought, oh, there's hope for me, like I'm going to come back, and I was just like, it's not going to happen. And about a year ago, almost a year ago, she said, I believe that me and your father confused you. We exposed you to different religions, so you were confused.
So have we gotten a phone call signal?
No, I think that was something else.
All right. Okay. We don't have a caller waiting. Sorry. My mistake.
So I said, that's okay. So I said, no, Mother, there's no confusion here. You don't have to ever worry about me setting foot in church again.
All right.
Unless it's for a wedding, funeral, or family event.
Well, Jen, we've gotten clarification. We do have a call here, so if you don't mind.
Sure.
Push on.
Okay.
Hello, caller. Can you give us a name or a nickname?
Excuse me. Something caught in my throat.
All right.
Caller would be just fine. I'll know who you're talking to.
All right, Mr. Caller. Do you have a...
Oh, actually, no. Just caller.
All right,
Mr.
caller.
Caller's my father.
All right. Do you have a comment or a question for us, or especially for Jenn Taylor, who's on the phone with us?
Yeah, Miss Taylor there. She was talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm happy that she's cleared up this window thing. But I'd heard that deal about that the Kingdom Halls do not have windows, but there's one over on Broadway going north out of Maryville, and it looks as if it has windows. And so what I did one day was went up and looked at them, and they're fake windows.
Wow.
Yeah. So the building doesn't look like some sort of place where they, nefarious. So it looks a little bit more normal, but they're fake. And one of the other things I was wanting to mention was that if Miss Taylor I don't know how it's coming over at the regular TV, but on the computer she's being over amplified. It might help if she held the phone.
I'll reduce our volume here a little bit in the studio. Jen, greet our caller here, and we can hear your voice.
Hello, caller.
Hello.
All right.
Hi.
I also there is a thing about the Jehovah's Witnesses though that I sort of think is kind of cool, and they have the belief that Jesus was not crucified on a cross. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, on a stake.
On a stake, yeah. And I thought how much more convenient that would be for those people that are fighting vampires. Because instead of having to hold both hands up to make the sign of the cross, you could just hold up one single finger and the vampires would run like the devil.
All right.
Do you have a question, though, caller?
No, I just wanted to, sign on, do a couple jokes, and then get off.
Well, but thank you for your observation about the Kingdom Hall that was trying to look not quite so, let's say, unworldly. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll be listening to the rest of your show. I hope somebody else calls, too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. All right,
Have a
well,
great night. Thank you.
and we should remind callers that this is a live show. We're speaking with Jenn Taylor, who is new to the area, and she's calling in today to speak to us about the experience and maybe her shock at coming to the Bible Belt.
And Jen, you've lived here in Knoxville for about a year. So have you found any special challenges that you faced since moving to the South?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm totally inundated by everything religious here.
Aren't we all?
It's like the society. It's like we're totally immersed in it here. Whereas like if you just say it's not unusual for me to come across people who go to church at least 2 or 3 times a week, whereas in Philadelphia, only extremely religious people did that. And if you tell someone in the Northeast you're not religious, they're like, oh, okay. I mean, most of them don't. They don't give it a second thought. They don't even bat an eye. I mean, it's more of a diverse area. Whereas here, I definitely feel like the minority, because almost everybody. I mean, even when you're going into stores, it's like God bless you on all the stores.
Right.
Have a blessed day. When somebody, when someone's checking you out at the grocery store, or how are you doing today? I'm blessed, and I mean, there's churches like everywhere. I mean, it's insane. It's just everywhere. I've never been in an environment like that where. So it's almost so. Although I haven't had any people that have been like belligerent towards me, or I mean, I haven't had any people being angry or anything, and people have invited me to churches. I actually get flyers in the mail inviting me to church. It's like, wow, what is this? Like, this is crazy. So it's just so unusual, and I've just never seen anything like it. I've heard about it before, but it's quite a different experience living here, being exposed to it.
I remember when I first moved here. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's almost like another world here.
So we should compare and contrast. Alita, when did you move here?
I moved here in 1972, and I remember meeting new people, even going into the store and shopping and running into people that I didn't know. They would ask me where I went to church, and I found that flabbergasting that even strangers would ask where I went to church.
So I came here in 1986, and I grew up in Minnesota, and in 1986, when I would speak to people, there would be no doubt in anyone's mind that I didn't grow up here. And I found that they would broach the subject in what I think of as the nicest of ways. They would say, have you lived here all your life? And I would explain, no, I'm from Minnesota. And then there would be the usual remarks about the severe winters up there, and I would say, yes, I'm fleeing from them. I don't want to shiver ever again. And then they would say, and where do you go to church? And because I didn't, so I found it both awkward, but I also realized it for them was the natural question for breaking the ice. And because I didn't have anything that fit within the natural category, it often ended up being a conversation stopper when maybe it didn't, that it wouldn't have been if I'd had some kind of an answer, maybe that they just didn't understand, like, well, okay, I go to the Humanist Assembly or Sunday Assembly or something like that. And if they didn't know, they wouldn't, if they didn't know that that's a secular organization, it had at least satisfied that little checkbox in the conversation, and they might have moved on to say, where do you have children? Where do they go to school? That kind of thing.
Right.
But the conversation often stopped after they would ask where I go to church, and I would say, I don't do that. And I actually might have often said that as a scientist, I have a better explanation for how the world comes about than the stories you hear there. I might have been that blunt on occasion.
I know I wasn't that blunt, and it was actually 1970. I added a couple of years or subtracted.
Yeah.
But at the time I moved here, I was still young enough and didn't have enough self-confidence to just, I would say, I don't go to church, but I wouldn't say, well, I'm an atheist, because that would have been a showstopper.
Yeah. Well, so Jenn, do you find that being a black atheist involves unique challenges?
Well, one thing is that we our culture is totally wrapped up in religion. It's it's unusual to be a black person who's an atheist. It's always assumed that you're religious, and I can't be around family without them having some sort of reference to some sort of God or a church or worship of some sort, and there's no real escaping it. And as someone who's an organizer for Black Atheists in Philadelphia, I've heard a number of stories. I get a number of inboxes from people and text messages and phone calls from people who are not open about leaving religion behind with their family. And some of them who have left religion behind have had to face being disowned, violence, physical violence for leaving, and it's been a hard way to go for me. Fortunately, I don't have any horror stories to tell about myself. My family, as I was growing up, I was known as like an oddball, and I always thought differently. And me being an atheist is just one more thing to add to the list.
Right.
Jenn, do you have siblings?
Yes.
Yes,
I have 5 younger brothers.
And
I have five younger brothers. My youngest brother is also a non-believer, and he also lives in the South. My one brother, the one that's next to me, his wife is Catholic, and he ended up going to Catholic church with her. And one brother has gone back and forth, like mostly to Baptist church. He's gone back and forth through the years, feeling like, hey, I want to get closer to God, and it never feeling like enough for him. Like it's like he wants to be connected, but he's kind of tried to force that connection off and on through the years. Another brother is like, hey, I think something's out there, but I don't know what, but I'm not going to say there is no God, but I'm not going to church either. I'm never setting foot in church. And another brother's like totally indifferent, doesn't talk about it, doesn't care. So, I mean, out of all of us that grew up in a religious home, there's none of us that's really all that, like, there's none of us that are like really religious and go to church every Sunday or do anything religious with any regularity. So, despite being overly churched from 2 different places, I suspect. Well, my youngest brother is a non-believer, but I suspect that 2 of my other brothers are non-believers as well, but they just don't want to admit it. They're in one really does believe, but he can't find any church that makes him where he's comfortable completely.
Right.
And goes back and forth, and I think he struggles with it. And the other one is kind of like, I'm just going to follow what my wife does, whatever she wants to do with me, I don't really care. So,
well, Jenn, we'd like to take a mid-program break here for a minute. And you can give your voice a rest, and we'll come back to you. So
in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Knoxville Community Access Television Channel 12 or Channel 194, depending on your local cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming on live online at ctvknox.org.
This is a call-in show, and today is September 22nd, 2015. Viewers can call in on the line, on the phone number on your screen, while we go to a short video informational break. Hit it, Sam.
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
Okay, Jen, we're back on the air. Tell us about your recent work here in Knoxville with the atheist community.
I ended up becoming one of the organizers for Humanists of East Tennessee. And it's mainly a social group where we go out to dinner. We have activities. I know last week they did kayaking, and I actually led a conversation a couple weeks ago about encouraging people to come out and be more open about their non-belief, and also discussing ways they could possibly broach the subject with their friends and family. So it was a pretty interesting conversation. It's a topic that comes up very often. Even as an atheist of color, the black atheist, it comes up fairly often, and it's been pretty good. One of the things, because I'm not from the area, I'm really looking forward to having more connections to people to do more community service work, because right now I'm feeling like, okay, well, I'm an atheist. Now what? I'm still a part of community. I still feel that there are needs that should be met in society, and I think that within the secular community, we should do more to help people that are hungry, or need clothing or shelter, or donate to organizations that help those in need. And I mean, I think that those are the kinds of connections that I would like to build. And I'm not opposed to even working with church groups in order to accomplish that, as long as, because I've done so in the past, and you're so caught up into working at the project at hand that the conversation of religion doesn't always come up, because you're focused on the greater good and not trying to find differences with one another.
Well, so I think you've touched on an important point, and that is that the secular organizations, the Atheist Society of Knoxville, the Rationalists of East Tennessee, the Sunday Assembly, and the Humanists of East Tennessee provide, a social place where people can meet others of like mind, and so it substitutes for a church in that it creates community. So you attended this Apostacon recently, and could you maybe tell us something about what Apostacon is and maybe the people you meet there?
Well, Apostacon lexicon, I actually didn't attend any of the speeches. I just happened to show up and crash the party. They actually had a costume party. People were dressed up like pirates, and it was a lot of fun.
Was this Saturday?
As a part of it, yeah, it was Saturday night, and so a number of people showed up, and they were hanging out in the lobby, but they also had like the room open for dancing and DJ, and it was just a fun time, just interacting with people there. It was fun. And I just happened to be in town because I ended up being in town to see the debate between Bart Ehrman and Justin Bass.
All right, I know who Bart Ehrman is, but let me interrupt. I know who Bart Ehrman is, but perhaps our viewers do not, and I don't know the other name. Could you briefly describe them and why that would be an interesting thing?
Okay, Bart Ehrman is actually in certain circles a very well-known biblical scholar, and he's someone who actually has written several books about the historical Jesus, and he actually goes around and does debates and lectures about historical Jesus. He happens to be agnostic, and Justin Bass is a religious person who actually is a pastor at a church in Dallas, and he wanted to go up against Bart Ehrman, and they were debating whether this historical Jesus claimed to be divine or not. So Bart Ehrman was saying that no, this historical Jesus never claimed to be divine, and Justin Bass claimed that this historical Jesus did. So
I would have liked to have been there. Yeah,
it was very interesting. It was very interesting.
All right.
And during the time after the debate was over, there was like a question and answer. There was a question and answer section of the debate, and my partner, my boyfriend at the time, decides to he gets up to ask a question. He thanks Dr. Ehrman and Dr. Bass, for the debate and all that and things, and says that, but I don't have a question for either one of you. And everybody's like looking around, quizzical, and then he says, but I do have a question for this lovely lady here. Jennifer, I love you with all my heart. Will you marry me? And this was in front of like 300 people. so he pulls this very long brain out and, proposes to me, gets on one knee and proposes to me in front of everyone there. And it was quite a surprise. And it turns out that both Justin Bass and Bart Ehrman were in on it, but he had to get permission from Bart Ehrman in order to do it, and the Bart Ehrman actually gave his consent, and it was wonderful. So he set it up where there was a guy there to take pictures of me and my reaction, which are all on Facebook, and he also had there's also a video of what happened. There's going to be another video where it's going to be an edited version where someone actually zoomed in and video taped the whole thing. And oh my goodness, I was in shock, so excited. I said yes, and so after it was all over, and the Q&A was over, we went up to say thank you to Dr. Bass and thank you to Dr. Ehrman, and Dr. Ehrman just hugged me. It was he was like, congratulations, and he was so thrilled and happy for us. Now, the importance of this event for my now future husband, Christopher. The importance of it for him, he is also a non-believer, but he really looks up to Bart Ehrman and has read many of his books. And I know that, and he actually did. Bart Ehrman has these courses. He took all of Bart Ehrman's courses. He's read the books. He also said that he also informed me that Bart usually requires about $5,000 to come to a speaking engagement, but he donates all $5,000 of it to charity.
Oh.
And yeah, so this guy also he has a blog, and he also he's a pretty humble guy, and he told me that a couple years ago he sent Bart Ehrman. He sent a note to Bart Ehrman and said, "Well, how does a guy get an autograph, a book autograph?" And he said, "Send me the book. What do you want it to say?" He sends it, and he autographs it and sends it back. So it was like an amazing moment for him, because he had a once in a lifetime opportunity to, in his mind, to be in front of somebody he really admires.
Right.
And he had an opportunity to really ask a biblical, well-read biblical scholar a question, but instead he asked me a question. So he uses this one opportunity
Oh, man.
to ask Bart Ehrman a question and asked me a question instead. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful time. But what happened was the next day was when we ended up going to the Atheist Hotel, which is a historical hotel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they have a restaurant called the French Room. So we went there for dinner, and it's world class, fine dining. We felt like we were the only ones there. The food was amazing. The service was just out of this world. The best ever. And
well, Jenn,
after that, I was like, hey, well. Yes.
We've got about a half a minute, so we'd like to let you sum up anything that you may have missed that we didn't think to ask you about, and then we'll have some closing remarks for the viewers. So can you give it about 30 seconds?
Okay. What I'd love to say is thank you very much for having me on the show, and if any of you out there are questioning and not religious, please feel free to reach out. And if you're a person of color in particular who's struggling with that, I know others like us out here, and there's plenty of us, and feel free to reach out. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on meetup.com. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jenn. And it's time to start wrapping things up, so get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Alita.
And I'm Faithless Forrest. Please send us feedback. Leave us voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the Knoxville station, and at 2100 Greenwich Time at ctvknox.org.
We'd like to thank our viewers and send our thanks to Sam and Carl for technical support, and the staff at CTV KNOX, and all our callers.
Thank you.
Thank you all.